If you love my barely prepared content here, then you'll love my completely unprepared content on my streaming channel, which is youtube.com/grimstreams, which is pretty easy to remember.
The introduction starts like this. Space, it says, is big, really big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the street to the chemist, but that's just peanuts to space. Listen. And so on.
Hello, lovelies. Today we're going to take a look at Traveller. This is the Mongoose version of Traveller. This is the most updated rulebook, the 2022 edition. I have been a fan of Traveller for a very long time, as this should elicit. I also have a Traveller 2300 box, but it's a bit fragile, so I don't want to get it out unless it's too necessary. I actually liked New Era. A lot of people didn't. The shift to a D20 roll and everything, but this book, I think, made up for a lot of its problems via Fusion and Steel, which was like construct all your own tech. There were rules for just about everything in there, or you could extrapolate rules for just about everything. It's just a pity some of the formulas were wrong. But anyway, we're not here to talk about the nostalgia side. We're here to talk about the more recent side of things. So this is the new core book. Mongoose Traveller has become quite well regarded. I have some of their older books. I think the Pocket Edition of their older version. Cephas Engine is the more open gaming license sort of thing, but it does mean that there is a lot of material out there that you can use that is compatible with Traveller, and this is broadly compatible with Traveller going back down the years. It returns to the 2d6 engine. The bonuses and everything are all going to be quite familiar. The scale of the weapons and everything, it's all going to be quite familiar. Now, I've long been a fan of Traveller because I like science fiction, and I like harder science fiction, and I like the science fiction that I grew up reading in the 1980s in particular. And Traveller always very well replicated the fictional worlds that we were seeing at the harder end of science fiction in the 70s and 80s, and the kind of things we were reading about, the kind of social science fiction, the technological science fiction, that kind of stuff. And it's all here. I mean, the thing about Traveller I've always found is that it is a toolkit game. There is a setting, there is a lot of lore and so on, but you don't necessarily have to pay any attention to it whatsoever if you don't want to. What it provides you with is a plausible technology base upon which an interstellar empire and various planets for you to explore, and systems for creating planets and cultures and everything else. You've got all of that, right? It's quite a simulationist RPG, but it's not too complicated unless you want it to be. And so if you want to run any sort of science fiction campaign, really, on a variety of different technological levels, you'll get everything you want from Traveller. And I'm not necessarily too enamoured of the actual background of Traveller, but like I say, I don't think it's necessarily that relevant. The elements that I liked, a lot of people didn't like the virus fleets, where whole fleets of starships have been taken over by an artificially intelligent computer virus. I thought that was a neat idea. Lots of people didn't like it. But the older versions of Traveller have aged not particularly well. A lot of people make fun of Cyberpunk because of the way it treated mobile phone technology. And yeah, that was rapidly outpaced by reality. The costs and the bulk and everything else about it just rapidly seemed silly. Traveller's a bit further in the future, but there were ideas in the 70s and 80s about computing technology and the bounds of computing technology and so on that were reflected in the rules of the earlier editions and seemed just ridiculous. This simplifies a bit in that it kind of decouples those kind of vulnerable aspects of technology from actually putting into gigabytes or petaflops or whatever else, and just talking about kind of bandwidth and capacity and so on. And that helps you disconnect from it and address it as it should be. Like I say, everything should be pretty familiar here to anyone who played any of the Games Designers Workshop versions of Traveller, 2300, Mega Traveller, New Era, any of that. It should all be familiar. The statistics are the same, 2d6 for each one. You go through careers. You won't die anymore during character creation necessarily, or at least it's going to be a hell of a lot rarer. You'll just kind of muster out or leave due to an incident rather than dying. Maybe you were disabled or got involved in something terrible or whatever else. I do feel, as I always have, that a lot of the career incident tables and things are too small. You're going to get too many replications if you play for any amount of time or have a reasonably large number of characters. And there is an emphasis in this one mostly upon the military careers. Those were always the most popular, so I understand for a core book. There are other ones, but hypothetically, with very little work, you could use any of the old previous career paths and so on from older versions of Traveller. Again, it's all broadly compatible, very small amount of work, and you could make it work. And there is a lot of supporting material that's produced under the open license. Again, Cephas Engine and so on. So there's a lot there. There are weaknesses in most science fiction games, which Traveller is guilty of as well. There's no way you can hope to cover every possibility for any and all alien species in a book, and so it doesn't. It gives you some generic types that you can kind of work around. I'm tempted to make a system for generating alien ecosystems. I made one when I was very young that turned up some interesting stuff. I remember I ended up generating a planet where amoebas and slimes were the dominant form of life, and there were intelligent blobs with spears who tried to pierce each other to kill each other. So yeah, maybe I'll do that. That's difficult to cover everything of. It's also difficult to cover the full span of technology in a core book. I mean, we still have the idea of tech level, but the tech level is early to high stellar for the most part, depending which planet you're on. Even though, hypothetically, technically, you could roll a planet with a tech level of 23 using the random generation, but tech level only goes as high as sort of 15 in here. So cutting edge technology from previous editions would be tech level 16. If you think about it. There's an excellent table in the back of one of the Mega Traveller books about tech levels and how they can be different in different fields of technology and science. And that might be a good thing to dig out or buy a PDF of if you can find it, to use for reference for those higher tech levels, to see what those kind of beings or colonies might be capable of. There's another problem that Traveller has always had, in that it tends to appeal to simulationist gearheads, and yet the fidelity of the system, obviously just being 2d6, can't really integrate everything that they might want to do to tweak their equipment or tweak their weapons or whatever. There's not enough fidelity in the system for there to be a real difference between a raw pistol and a raw pistol with laser sight, comfort grip, counterweight, center firing barrel, so it's more close to the actual center of your hand, all of that kind of thing. There's just not the capacity in the system to do it. You could design it, but it wouldn't necessarily impact the value of the weapons. So that's another weakness that I've always felt that Traveller has. If you're not as interested in that kind of techie side of things, and total optimization of equipment and so on, it's not a problem. But a lot of people go to Traveller for that heavy crunch sort of system. You can't really do that in this version of Traveller, or really any previous version of Traveller, despite the existence of Fire Fusion and Steel. But you can do it once you get to sort of Starship scale. And there are Starship design rules in here. The other just weapons, they don't have the... Because it's not a high fidelity system, there's not a huge amount of difference between different weapons. Which can be disappointing to some people. But as I was saying, there are Starship creation rules in here. The ones in the main book are usable. Not too simplistic. Yeah, it's certainly easier than it has been in earlier editions, and yet it remains plausible and it retains the spirit that the older game versions had. I mean, the thing about Traveller is that you don't need to play it to have fun with it. You can have fun generating star systems. You can have fun creating spaceships. You can have fun just generating characters and figuring out what their life story is. There is still the problem that your party is likely to end up being a gang of geriatric ex-military people who've left at an advanced age and are therefore somewhat wealthy and comfortable and have their own starship. That's kind of fun in and of itself. That's always been a bit of a problem with Traveller. They have addressed the character growth issue because you can train and learn during the period of play. Because it used to be you kind of had a pretty set character and you couldn't change very much. I didn't see anything much about changing your biological statistics, your strength, dexterity, and so on, other than cybernetics. But in theory, you could quite easily hack in some rules for, weight training or whatever to boost you up. The scout ship is here. Obviously, that's the most iconic, I would say, other than the Far Trader. And you've got your basic various options of starships in here, and the rules for creating more. And these give you a kind of basis upon which you can build whatever it is that you want to build. Obviously, as a core book, everything is compromised to a degree to fit in, but there's certainly enough there. And unlike a lot of books, a lot of games, the expansion material is going to be worthwhile because these are the basics, and you couldn't address it all in the core book to a sufficient degree. So there's a good reason to have additional source books. And I'm going to combine this review with one of those source books. This is the Traveller Highguard update book for 2022. And this basically expands on ship operations, ship crew operations. So, people aren't just sitting there bored while Starship Combat goes off. And has a whole bunch of new ships, new ship construction, slightly more detailed, but still simple enough. New options, ideas, and a whole bunch of new ships. So there's plenty here. And again, because there is open game support for Traveller via Cephas Engine and others, you've got a world of options out there of things that fans have created. So there's plenty out there that you can blag and use with Traveller to your heart's content. But this definitely fills out the core book to the degree that you need for Starship options. Everything else might be stuff that you want, but you do have plenty of other options here. It is something of a shame that this book doesn't include some kind of experimental tech above tech level 15. But again, you can go to previous editions and Fire Fusion and Steel if you want to go and look for that kind of thing. That's one good thing about games with a lot of heritage that have kept basically the same system throughout time. You've got plenty of options and extra stuff to draw upon. But you can see, just as I'm flipping through the sections, you've got a lot more details and options and sub-options and customizations that you can apply to the various ship systems to make them more effective or more suited to whatever it is that you happen to want to do. The artwork is better than a lot of previous editions, though obviously having worked with Brad McDevitt, I have a weakness for his artwork in previous editions of Traveller. Some of Mongoose's stuff can be a bit... I'm not sure which artist it is, but one of the artists, their faces end up a bit too fuzzy, and the proportions don't seem quite right. But throughout this book, things are mostly good, and there's a lot of decent graphic work, which is also appealing. Mass Effect was, I think, informed by the 70s and 80s science fiction aesthetic that also informs Traveller, and that is visibly present in this book as well. In fact, it wouldn't be too bad a system to use to emulate Mass Effect, which is slightly crunchier. You'd have to adjust some of the technology and so on to make the ships and so on work. But it wouldn't be too difficult, I wouldn't think. Though I did create a fan version, which you can find on my blog, postmortemstudios.wordpress.com, of Mass Effect, which used the silhouette system, which scales in a really useful way. But we're not talking about that. So there are a lot more ships in this, and there are a lot more versions of ships. So you can take a ship or a version of a ship and then use the rules to customize it to fit your character's needs. But there's a lot more options here that really fill out the world of Starships. Me being me, I would have liked to have seen more work ships, background ships, fuel haulers, mining ships, in-system passenger ships, stuff like that. But you do have a very good variety of things in here. I mean, there's an issue here in that there's the practicality of being able to generate the full breadth of ships that there would be in any source book. In some ways, it's futile trying to do that. But it's hard to explain why an empire as expansive as that in Traveller has the same ships everywhere, the same pattern of ship created everywhere, when, even with jump drive, it takes a very long time to pass from one side of the empire to the other, and it makes it also hard to explain why the technology is all at the same level, because with that much humanity out there experimenting, a lot of it at high stellar or more tech level, you'd think that innovations would spring up and spread. But if you can suspend your disbelief, you're fine. I did like seeing the planetoid option in here. That's an old idea, that you could hollow out asteroids and use them as spaceships, even like generation ships, things like that, because they have their own shielding. You can hollow them out and use the raw materials that you collect to build the ship. It's a nice thing, and I liked to see it here. I'm impressed. I have, like I say, I have a couple of earlier versions of Mongoose's Traveller, and they're nowhere near as polished or as well produced as these hardback books are. If you're looking to get back into Traveller, I think this is a good place to go, and it should be broadly compatible with all your old material, with a little bit of tweaking. And because a version of the rules were put out under the OGL, there's a hell of a lot of support out there as well. But from what I've seen so far of Mongoose's supplementary books, they're good. So it's worth getting the official stuff as well. I'm glad to be able to say something nice about things. So, style. Clean graphics, good sized text, very readable, layout's good and professional, and does somewhat call back to that 70s and 80s style. So, I mean, not thoroughly outstanding, but good, readable, solid. The artwork's a bit mixed. There is still this muddiness problem with color artwork in RPGs in general. It's like I always want, I think the vibrance and the saturation and the contrast should all be turned up a bit on most books that have color art in them. But that's a common problem, so I can't really fault it on that. I would say style for both books is 4. In terms of substance, the main book is missing stuff, but there is no way around it, really. There's no way you could pack everything in full detail into a core book, but it has everything you need and enough that you can extrapolate what you need from it if it doesn't have what you need. So in terms of substance, 4 as well. So 8 out of 10, 4 out of 5. A definite recommend, seal of approval. And High Guard, I'd say content, again, a 4. The only thing that would make it better is if there was more stuff for lower and higher tech levels. So you could bring some of that experimental kind of edge tech in for X vessels or baddies or plot points or technology that you might steal, stuff like that. So 8 out of 10, 4 out of 5 as well. Yeah, so it's a solid recommendation for Mongoose Traveller, and other fans seem to agree. I'll play it at some point. At least one game. Zang.
The Atomic Age, with its A-bombs, transistorized radios, jet engines, and a new breed of dangerous supervillain, requires heroes to face the challenge. That's where you come in. The world needs you, Agent. Agent of Swing.